Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 24th episode of By the Drip. This podcast is about coffee, entrepreneurship, and the amazing people we meet through the story of coffee. I'm your host, David Crosby, founder and CEO of ROSSO COFFEE ROASTERS. Today's guest is Kyle Ramage, a former United States Barista Champion and co-owner of Black and White Coffee Roasters. In this episode, Kyle shares his incredible journey in the coffee industry, from his start in getting involved in the specialty coffee scene to participating in the World Barista Championship. Kyle opens up about his experience being featured in a documentary about barista competitions. He offers valuable advice for aspiring coffee shop owners and highlights the growth and scaling of Black and White Coffee Roasters. Kyle also shares his thoughts on the controversy surrounding the Best of Panama competition and the use of innovative processing techniques in specialty coffee. To wrap up, Kyle talks about the exciting opening of a new store. So tune in to the compelling conversation with Kyle Ramage, filled with unique insights and valuable lessons from the specialty coffee world. Let's dive in. Kyle, thanks for taking the time to join me.
Truly an honor. Yeah. Truly.
Appreciate it. We've never had a film star on our podcast here. Last night, I spent 4 hours of my life watching Baristas and Barista documentary, and I want to start there.
Let's do it.
Take us back to 2017. Maybe talk about the documentary, how you got involved, the pressure.
Neither of us are strangers to competition, but in 2017, a group of folks out of California decided they were going to film a documentary around the kind of run-up and then succession of the 2017 World Barista Championship, which was in Seoul, South Korea. Which, honestly, looking back on it, I think it's one of the most interesting World Barista Championships that has ever taken place, because it's probably the most grand that has ever happened. And some of the biggest names in coffee that are still in coffee and still doing interesting and wild stuff in coffee were in the finals that year. It's a really honorable group to be a part of. And it was a really deep competition in that maybe the top 12 or 15 were incredibly talented and are still in the industry doing different stuff, which is incredible. But anyway, to be mentioned among them is incredible to me. But anyway, running up to the 2017 United States and World Barista Championship, they kind of caught me as I had just won the championship in the U.S. in Seattle, which is also one of the biggest competitions Seattle had ever seen, because it was before the SCA kind of changed their structure. They're still mostly owned by the American group, and therefore had huge budgets, and those massive amounts of cameras and screens everywhere, and it felt like it's a very big to do at that time. It's a little different now, but things happen. So I ended up winning over Andrea Allen, who ended up winning not the next year, but the following year. No, it wasn't. It was she won the COVID year in Milan. Yeah. So eventually ended up winning regardless, which I did not think I was going to win by any stretch of the imagination. I had never made finals before in the U.S. I had never really had much success in the U.S. Before that, my highest ranking was 22nd or 23rd or something like that. So I'd never made semifinals before in the U.S. To go from 23rd or 24th, whatever the place was in Long Beach, to not qualifying the next year to winning was a pretty wild series of events. So this documentary kind of followed me and Lynn Butler, my business partner, and kind of competition's partner, buddy. I don't know how you describe that. I coached him the year before in 2016 when he won and went to Dublin, and then he turned around and coached me 2017 when we went to Seoul. It was a really interesting time in both of our lives, where we were both kind of riding the high of the whole deal. You guys have had quite a lot of success here in the last few years with coaching and all that stuff. It feels insane for the person you're coaching to succeed, and it also feels insane to succeed as well, which is super fun. We also represent the southeast of part of the United States, which, if you look at the country, it's obvious. It's kind of 4 big main quadrants, and 6 if you want to count the Midwest, but whatever. And the Southeast is historically not known for producing some of the more prestigious competitors, nor are they known for producing very intelligent people, as far as it goes in the in the zeitgeist to be American. To be from the Southeast is not really where the the brightest stars come from. So it was cool to represent the Southeast as well as to represent the Southeast with a very technical and very science driven and scientific theory based presentation. So we got to present this, and it followed me and a few other competitors around, Miki Suzuki, who ended up getting third, as well as German competitor. I can never remember her name. The guy with synesthesia from Ireland.
Yep.
Was there one more? I don't remember. I think it was just those four.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I didn't go see the filming for them. I just saw the video work afterwards. It was pretty wild to have someone follow you around for like 5 days straight, like 12, 14 hours a day. Made me realize pretty quickly that I was not cut out for television. And I really, really, really didn't like how invasive it was and how it felt. You feel kind of like I felt anyway, maybe not you, but I felt like a kind of a bug under a microscope kind of thing is kind of how I felt about it. Some of the stuff was quite intense. Some of the sessions of filming were quite intense, and I'm a pretty open kind of dude. So some of the stuff that I shared was like very, very, very personal, but I was happy to share it in that way, be vulnerable in that way. The kind of the session it's actually in one of our friends' coffee shops where we talk about depression and anxiety and what it feels like, what the pressure feels like for the competitions. Stuff's real. I really say that the competitions really probably took a few years off my life just for the stress level. It's really high. And I run pretty hot. I run pretty intense. So the stress level can be, relatively overbearing, overwhelming at times, but the highs are crazy high. The lows are pretty low. As you know, running those, the competition schedule can be pretty grueling, traveling, not sleeping very well, sleeping in other people's houses, eating new food, eating no food, not doing your physical regimen that you're used to of like workouts or whatever it may be. It's just challenging to run that kind of grueling schedule. So, but it was a super fun event. And thankfully they represented me in a way that was pretty positive. They kind of turned me into kind of this like mad scientist character, which is fine. Probably in some ways less intense about stuff and more intense about other stuff than the reality of the depiction there. So
was it creating extra pressure when you went to Korea and competing, or that kind of went by the wayside?
It went by the wayside for me, honestly. The pressure of being there, representing the U.S., knowing that if I didn't make the finals, I had failed, was the reality at the time, right? Because at the time, the U.S. had quite a few years of being quite successful. Charles, Lim, myself, I was kind of along this lineage of like doing quite well, and I really wanted to do well for myself and to prove it to myself, but also just like the pressure of like representing your country is it feels pretty heavy, especially representing a historic powerhouse, U.S. like Canada. At the time, Hong Kong, Japan. I mean, some of your major players from all over the world. Where those 6 finalists were like that year were Australia, of course. Were some of the most prestigious countries historically of the WBC, and what the historic kind of breakdown of champions had been. So.
And can you maybe, for listeners, talk about what you presented on?
Yeah, sure. So I presented a concept brought to me by Christopher Hendon, who is a computational chemist at the University now of Oregon. I think he was at MIT. He was doing his postdoc at MIT at the time when he kind of presented this concept. He may have actually still been in the UK at the University of Bath. I'm not 100% sure when the paper was written, but it presented a conceptual idea that coffee, when it is ground at the state of which it is frozen to the point of its glass state. So most things have a glass state of solidness. So you think about glass is technically like a very, very, very slow moving liquid. But if you make it even colder, it gets even more fragile to where it kind of explode into millions of little tiny pieces when it breaks. That's the glass state that we're kind of searching for. And they found that coffee entered its glass state somewhere around the temperature of dry ice, which is, I forget that number off the top of my head. It's been 7 years almost. I presented the same thing, and Miki Suzuki presented the same concept as well, but with liquid nitrogen, which is even colder than dry ice. But now they've come out to find that maybe that isn't exactly what's happening and it may be the cooling of the coffee is actually protecting the coffee from the grinder. Because even grinders like the EK43 that move coffee through them very quickly, still like friction and heat are a reality in those machines. heat is the enemy of like these very, very nuanced coffee flavors that we really, really love. Florals in particular are like quite damaged by the heat. So the paper is on nature.com. You can go read it still. I kind of presented that concept. So at the time, I had just left my job with Makunig, the grinder manufacturer, and had transitioned between US and Worlds. I transitioned out of Makunig USA and into Black and White, which is the grocery that I work for now, operate now. Thankfully, still had access to a lot of the data that we'd collected through the laser particle analysis of these coffees, and of course through the data that was presented with Chris and Maxwell and a few other folks who are dear friends as well. Yeah, it was a pretty cool time to be in coffee, and a pretty cool time to be among some of the greatest in the world. Truly, I look back on those times as like very influential, and met some people and had some conversations at that WBC in Seoul that were pretty groundbreaking for me as a person. So yeah.
And then you talk in the documentary, in the finals, coffee didn't quite hit, and you're a little...
Man.
Were you upset? Like,
gosh.
I thought, you had been in the top 6 in the US Nationals quite a bit, but that's a big jump to go 22nd first and then make finals in your first year. But we also recalibrate. You make finals and then you recalibrate that day and you're like, okay, I'm in finals. I'm 1 of 6 now. Like, I can get this done.
Yeah, I thought there was a possibility, there's outside chance that I could win. The coffee was amazing, but I had some snafus kind of the final day. I had some grinder issues. I had some gasket issues with the machine on stage. For some reason, they chose to like go from the standard gaskets to some silicone ones. I don't know if you've ever used the silicone gaskets or not. They stink. They leak really bad. And so it just leaked on stage. And so I didn't really get up to pressure in my espresso courses, but I didn't technically have enough time to pull it again because I just didn't have enough time. My stuff was run to the second. Like if I did it all perfect, I would be like 14:55 to 58. So
wow.
I really did not have another 30 seconds to spare. So I was just like, well, I'm here. I guess I'm going to send it and we're going to see what happens. Also, like my timer, so at that time I had a timekeeper who was starting my time for me. It was up on a big clock kind of above the espresso machine. And I don't look up until about 7 minutes.
And it's not going
at that time. And it wasn't going. And it was like, oh my gosh. And so that just kind of put me in a kind of a stress point. And like to be on stage at WBC sounds like it'd be like the most stressful thing in the world. But the reality of it is if you've got everything going the way you want to, it's kind of this flow state. It kind of feels, to be very transparent, if you have the ability to make finals at WBC, you have most likely gotten into that kind of flow state where you feel very comfortable on stage and you feel it's just all you can see. As far as the people I've talked to about it, they see it's kind of similar to me. All you really see are the 4th entry judges, and you don't see anyone else. You don't see the crowd. You don't see the tech judges. You don't see the head judge. Usually, you just kind of flow and you're just in it. You're locked into these 4 people who are trying to provide them this experience. When you look at 7 minutes, you look up and you have no timer to kind of follow after. That whole week, my music had been messed up for some crazy reason. It didn't play the first round. We couldn't have it the first round, right?
Yeah.
In the second round, it messed up and like stopped and started and stopped and started. It's just kind of one of those kind of, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Lemony Snicket's, but it's called Lemony Snicket's, A Series of Unfortunate Events.
Okay.
And that's kind of what it felt like. It was just kind of was one of those things where like, we made finals, we got there, we did it. It didn't go the way I wanted on the last day. I scored about 100 points lower on the last day than I really had the day before. So that took me from about 3rd or so to 6th, which is fine. I mean, 6th, the world's still insane. I like to say that I've made the most out of my 6th place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a good time. But to be very transparent, the WBC to win the WBC never really was the goal. The goal of going to these competitions was to prove to people that I could have a conversation about flavor and have a conversation as a grinder guy, quote unquote grinder guy, and be a part of the conversation in a way that was real. And I think some of that was created by my own mind. Like I had a chip on my shoulder, or I had an insecurity about who I was as a taster or as a professional or whatever, and maybe just thought people didn't take me seriously. Because now going back and having conversations with people who were impactful to me during that time, kind of the formative years, they were all like, oh man, we always knew you were going to do something really interesting. We just had no idea what it was going to be. It's like, oh, I didn't know that about myself. I didn't even feel that about myself. So thanks, I guess. But yeah, you could have told me too. That'd have been cool.
Have you had anyone like reach out over the years saying they watched that and like a lot of baristas have reached out and said,
yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, that's how I ended up meeting you and your brother as well. Like, that's how we just like, hey, I saw the thing you did in America that was really cool. I guess we met in Amsterdam for the
Yeah.
first time in person, at least. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That presentation like really resonated with a lot of people. I thought it was really interesting, a really different way to think about coffee, and a little bit more of a technical platform. I think it gave some people who are a little bit more into math and science that kind of catch to be like, oh, okay, cool. Kyle's a little bit more wooden than say like Cole or maybe some of the other presenters who are really, really smooth, but presented really interesting information in a way that was impactful and useful in the cup. Maybe that opens up an opportunity for me to talk about something else, something different. That's actually how I ended up getting coaching Sam Spillman in
19.
28,
No.
19, 18 and 19 actually.
Okay.
But yeah, co-coach in the U.S., she got seventh. And when she won and went to Boston and got another series of unfortunate events. But yeah, had the second highest espresso score though, so that's cool in the first round. Yeah, and some of the other coaching gigs that we've gotten over the years have been kind of, echoes of that concept, which has been fun. It's been a lot of fun to help people find their own voice, even if it's distinctly different than my voice of competition. And I think that's something you guys have done quite well also. It's like I can see little maker's marks, if you will, when y'all are coaching, but it doesn't sound like Cole on stage. It doesn't sound when you work with another professional. It sounds like them on stage, and you just have these little. It's mostly gear that I see. There's like, oh, okay, there's that little piece of tech that helps with this score point and this stuff right here. Especially, I mean, this year I think was a master class in y'all working and helping to find a person to give them an even more of an opportunity to share their own voice with Mikhail. So that was. Nikki I was pretty blown away. I was like, oh crap, that's really, really, really cool. Because freaking dude from Canada, a dude from Australia also brought the absolute heat, Jack.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh, these are very different things.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think competitors stepping into the coaching role is super interesting because you want to have, I think as a coach, you want to elevate their voice and not put your voice through them. And that's really important. And I've never competed, but you and Cole have, and multiple times. And I think that's a nice element. We got the documentary, but I want to go back. How did you get into the coffee industry?
Oh, nice. Yeah. That's a fun story, right? So I've given this guy flowers a bunch of times, but I was just a master's student at this school here in town. And I was sitting next to a guy whose buddy was opening a coffee shop. And I was like, oh, cool. I worked at a coffee shop when I was in high school. We served like flavored coffee and, it was very like second wavy, like, super dark. Everything was really dark and like leather couches and like a fireplace and like 700 syrups. I don't know if that was a Canadian thing or not.
Oh, yeah,
it was for sure an American thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Holy crap. It was incredible. I loved a butterscotch latte or whatever I drank back in the day, and some Southern pecan. I think it was the flavored coffee that was really popular at that cafe. But anyways, so I would always drink coffee in class, and he's like, hey, my buddy's opened a coffee shop. You should go talk with him. I was like, sure, man, whatever. I need a job. I'm in grad school. I'm not doing a whole lot other than like reading a bunch. And so that coffee shop was called Jubala Village Coffee in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he was really the first specialty player in our city that took it like super serious, right? Like it kind of opened during that like 2010 phase, 2011 phase of like no cream and sugar, drink it black only, kind of no batch brewer kind of thing. That's changed, thankfully, for him and for his business. But
and what year would you be working there? 2010?
Yes, I guess so. Yeah, it would have been 2010. I think it opened April. Maybe it opened April 2011 is when it opened. Maybe. But yeah, it was it was a counterculture account. That's where I met Lim as well. Was through that account as well. So he was working at counterculture at that time and did until 2017, I guess. So yeah, that's another 6 years or whatever. So yeah, that's I started working there and just really fell in love with specialty and what it was like. Cause I didn't understand it at all at first. Cause like I had like a home espresso machine, but it was like the terrible ones you get from Bed Bath & Beyond. And like pretty quickly fell into pour over coffee and sourcing. And then Tim Hill, who's like the kind of prolific green buyer for counterculture for a super long time, and now works for Atlantic Specialty and is a huge part of why our African coffees taste the way they do. If you love them, thank him. If you hate him, it's probably my fault.
You're doing your master's, you said?
Yeah, I was doing my master's. Yeah, I have a master's in divinity, actually. So I was studying to be a minister, and like father's a minister as well. And so it was like in the back of my mind, I was always like, I think I want to do this. And then I kind of got further and further into it. I was like, oh, maybe vocationally being a minister is really not what I want to do. Faith is still a huge part of my life and the way I do things and the way that I operate. But being like a vocational, getting paid by the church, I always kind of struggled squaring up, but it didn't ever make a lot of sense to me. I feel like I'm like what they call like a lay minister. So I still help around my church and do a lot of stuff there, but I'm not like a paid minister. So, which is cool. It's just great. It's fantastic. There's a lot. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. And maybe take a whole other podcast to talk about. But yeah, I ended up in coffee and have really loved it and got to travel the world and meet some amazing, really, really rad people all over the world and be truly inspired by people who think totally different than I do, which is fascinating. This like I'm a farm boy from Mississippi, right? So I was raised on a cotton farm in rural Mississippi, and to be able to, travel to Saudi Arabia and all over Europe and Asia and all those things to talk about coffee and love on people all over, it's been a blast for me. What a cool ride it's been.
We say that all the time. It's amazing how many places, how many people we've seen and been. And so thankful we got to kind of like stumble into this industry. So how do you make the transition from you're a barista at this coffee shop into you open Black and White, I guess 6 years later? What's the course? How does that happen?
Yeah, I kind of like stuck around counterculture a lot. Like I was there quite a lot, quite often. Sometimes I would just show up there randomly and just annoy them, I think was the general rule of thumb. So I kind of became friends with Lim and a few of the other guys. One guy named Ethan Fogelman, who was just like he was running the operations at Counterculture's Roastery at the time. Now he does grocery sales, I believe. Ethan just became a really close friend. We both had more rural backgrounds, had a little bit more of a Southern draw than a lot of the folks did at Counterculture who were from like Chicago or wherever, LA or whatever else. So we became friends. And then he introduced me to a guy named Gary Horn, who was at the time running Makonig USA. And they really wanted to focus on kind of specialty coffee as like a pure focus of theirs. So they were really looking to bring someone on who could be really specialty focused and to go to a couple of these events like the competitions and the barista camps. If you remember those or not, maybe they didn't come to Canada. But so you really want to bring someone on to do those. And so I started working for Makonig in Makonig USA. Gosh, what was it? 2014, 2015, something like that.
Okay.
And that's where I started meeting competitors, going to the events, ended up being like the head tech for Makonig for the Seattle Worlds. That was really the first one that really blew me up, where I met like Maxwell, I met Pete from Push Tampers, I met Kale Frese from now Sudden. He was with someone else at the time. And like all these competitors all around the world. Charles Babinski, of course, I had met him before, but that was his year of getting second. That's where I met a lot of the Australian guys as well. We're in Sasha won in Seattle. And it really kind of ignited my love for the WBC, getting to be backstage and meeting all the competitors and tasting coffee. I'm like, actually, I'm actually not that far off flavor, like understanding flavor wise to these people. It's not worlds apart. It's like, it's close enough. Like this is not an insurmountable thing. At least I told myself that in my head. So yeah, that was the whole transition. And then as that kind of continued on, I started competing in the US to like largely mixed reviews. By mixed, I mean largely poor reviews. I would usually do one thing that was just like overly silly or like overly too much. Like, do 3 coffees or do a really esoteric brew method or, I always watched Ben Putt's stuff a bunch. So I'd always try to copy some things that Ben did. I'm like, oh, cool. This guy's on a different planet than me. And so it was always so tricky to try to bring in these, like some random, like really, really technical thing that would just blow up in my face. The year I didn't qualify for nationals, I tried to do like the siphon, like the whipped cream siphon brewing thing that Ben had been doing.
Yeah.
I tried to do that and the judges thought it was miserable. So that didn't go great. Yeah.
So what started to happen? You're competing, you're working at this grinder company. What makes you want to open your own coffee shop? What makes you want to start roasting? How did you team up with Lem?
Oh, that's a really good story. Cause like, I actually didn't want to leave equipment. Like I really enjoyed equipment. Equipment offers you this opportunity to kind of leave things at the door. When you leave out, you don't really have to, you don't have to answer your phone at midnight. You don't have to be up at 5. You can kind of do more of a 9 to 5 kind of concept. I didn't operate that way though, because that's not what, really hungry 25-year-olds do. I really enjoyed my time there, and ended up like doing some consulting on the side for like upstart roasteries, and like I just became a part of the local community as I already was for the cafe. Then I went to the equipment thing, and then continued on doing stuff, throwdowns and those kind of things. I ended up consulting for actually one of my old professors from graduate school. He opened up a roastery in the town where our cafe is, which actually is the cafe he opened, called Back Alley Coffee Roasters. So it was him and another professor had started it like in the back alley of one of the seminary campuses things. I ended up consulting on that project for him and like very like tertiarily. And then eventually he's like, hey, I think I actually don't want to do this coffee thing. I want to but go back to being a professor and go and get another doctorate or whatever. The dude has like 4 doctorates or something crazy like that. There's Tracy McKenzie. He's ridiculous. He can sight read Hebrew, which I don't know if you ever like seen Hebrew, but it doesn't like have vowels,
Wow.
so to speak. So it's very confusing. I sight read it into English. So like we'll read Hebrew and translate it to English in his head, because that's incredible. That's a thing people do, I guess. Not me. But anyways, so he offered to sell me. He offered me to come on to work for him, and I was like, I don't think that's going to work. With the funding's not right. Like we need more money to make it really work, to make the traction happen. And I don't want to be this like huge burden on you personally to have to pay me this salary that I need to, because I have a house now. I have like a home that I have to pay for. And so that ended up kind of falling through. And then he offered to sell maybe 6 months later. And we took us a while to figure that out. But we brought in another investor. His name's Darren, and me and Lim. There's 3 of us that own Black and White Coffee Roasters LLC here in North Carolina. And so we had a backer and then 2 operators, which was cool. And yeah, that was terrifying to sign the papers on like owing another dude like, more money than I'd ever like seen in person, which is scary. But yeah, it worked out.
So you started in 2017?
Yeah. In between, we had kind of started doing the paperwork before USBC. So it was going to happen regardless of if I'd have won or not. But ended up winning. And then kind of, instead of building the business right away, we kind of focused on like WBC and doing that stuff. Or we tried to. It was really challenging to do 2 things at once like that, like start a new business and practice with WBC was really tough. I do not advise that whatsoever, but that's how it happened. So,
but it in a way, it was amazing, like kind of branding event for the company.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We were actually I was competing as Black and White Coffee Roasters in Seoul. So that was fantastic.
If you could go back to yourself at the very beginning of, signing that deal, what's some advice you would have given yourself as a brand new owner operator of this coffee shop roastery?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So this is something you have to learn the hard way typically, but your operating agreement and all the contracts you sign are there to protect you when times are really, really bad. So it's hard to think about the bad times when you've never experienced the bad time, right? So in some of the contracts that we signed, early on, we didn't understand or we didn't pay the extra, whatever, $500 to have a lawyer look over it. Always have a lawyer look over all of the documents you sign that have you owing money to someone, especially like large sums of money with lots of zeros. Man, it's like, it ended up working out totally fine. It hasn't been an issue, but like going back and looking through the documents, if my partners would have been sociopaths or would have like really wanted to like make my life really, really difficult, our operating agreement is not set up for like avenues of exit that are very straightforward and easy. It's not necessarily set up for one thing that we didn't even realize about our operating agreement is it had to have unanimity, which means that we all had to agree on every decision.
Oh, wow.
Like every one of them, which we never really operated like that. We always operated as like, okay, cool. If 2 people voted for a thing, then the third person would just kind of like give in and be like, okay, that's fine. That's kind of how it ended up working out. But again, like if I would have been in business with someone a bit more hard nosed or a bit more like by the book, it could have been a lot more challenging of an opportunity than it ended up being. Yeah, just have someone look over your legal documents. It's a good idea. You may not have the $500 necessarily to have them look over it, but I promise you it will be worth it in the long run. It'll either give you peace of mind or it will give you a better understanding of your operating agreements or lease agreements or any of that stuff. It can really, really, really help you. Even if you think someone is trying to do right by you, they may be, but the lawyer who's working for them doesn't understand the business you're in, which is kind of what we end up getting. The lawyer who wrote the paperwork didn't understand exactly how our business was going to operate. So it kind of less than ideal scenario for the physical contracts, which we're like fixing now. But yeah, it's tricky.
So hire that lawyer.
Yeah, hire a lawyer. Yeah.
Pay the $500.
Do you hate lawyers? Yeah, pay the money, man. Do it. Yeah.
What are some challenges you kind of faced at the beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had one cafe, and then we had the roastery, which was, I'd never commercially roasted coffee before. That was a pretty huge problem. You've never roasted coffee before, to start roasting coffee for a job.
Wow.
It's tricky. Turns out it's hard. So yeah, like understanding all the ins and outs of how green coffee moves around the world, and how scary that can be when you're signing these contracts for, for $50, $60, $75,000 at a time. Like, that's terrifying. I remember the first time we bought a full pallet of coffee, I was like, this is freaking horrifying.
Yeah.
It's like 10 bags of coffee. Like looking back on it now, like, oh, that's fine. That's like what we roasted. Like we roasted more than that today. It's no problem. But then it was horrifying because it was like I had to personally secure a lot of that stuff too. I didn't understand what that meant.
Oh, wow.
Like I had to put my own credit on the line because the company didn't have any credit.
Yeah.
So I had to personally guarantee that coffee sale or that coffee contract, which is terrifying. But yeah, I had to learn to ask the right questions, like to try to find the coffees that we wanted to sell and we want to focus on. And then trying to build a menu at that time was a little more tricky than it is now. There's a lot of really cool importers who are like kind of breaking down some of the barriers to get access to these cool coffees. Something that Forward does as well is give people access to really interesting projects around the world that didn't exist in 2017. But those projects just weren't really real yet. When we came, like Atlantic Specialty didn't really exist in the same way it exists now, who we use a lot. Of course, WhatsApp and how I end up communicating with producers now didn't really exist in the same way it does now. So it was a different time. Yeah.
Did you learn how to roast just on the fly?
Yeah. Yeah. So the guy who had the roastery before us, he showed me how he roasted coffee. And I was like, okay, cool. That's a good start. And this man, my homie, I almost didn't give him what he deserved. His name is James Gibbs. He worked for Caravella. Still does, I think, work for Caravella Coffee. I think he lives in Arizona again. He was living here in the Triangle, and he had roasted on an S15, the smaller loring, the 15 kilo loring, when he worked for Allegro, I think. And he just was so kind as to come and show me his technique for how he operated the roaster and how he preheats it and how he does all this other stuff. And then randomly, Rob Hoosh just came through one day, was in town doing a consulting gig for someone else, and just popped through and said, "What's up?" Another prolific loring roaster guy. So that was cool. And then we just started doing it our own way. But thankfully, we had kind of three people to kind of show us their ways of doing it, and then ended up coming down on somewhere in between all three of those things. So it's pretty cool.
And you're the green buyer. Are you the head roaster?
No, I'm not the head roaster anymore. A guy named Matt Ferraro came on for us just over 3 years ago now, and has been the head roaster and head of operations for the last 3 years. We had another head roaster before. Her name was Ruth Ann. She ended up just kind of ducking out of coffee for a while. COVID really burned a lot of people to an absolute crisp because we, and in the coffee world in North Carolina anyway, we worked the whole time. We didn't take time off at the roastery. There was no shutdown for us. We were considered an essential business. So we still had orders to fill. We still had stuff to do. So it was a weird, very challenging time to be an operator of a business, first of all. But just to be a person was really tough. And so I think coffee burned a lot of people down during that time. I know the American Specialty professional group, the professionals that were American Specialty Coffee, are definitely not the same as before that time. It's just burned a lot of people out.
And how big is the roastery? How many pounds, if you want to reveal, are you guys doing a week or a month?
Yeah. So we are right now. The facility is 14,000 square feet, which that sounds massive. It kind of is, but. So the cool thing about North Carolina is it's a little bit more affordable to operate in this part of the country because it's just there's more commercial space available for reasonable prices. I can't imagine operating black and white in California or even in Colorado or places that are just a little bit more expensive to live. It would be very, very, very challenging. But so we were about 14,000 square feet. We're roasting about 14,000 pounds a week, give or take.
Oh, wow.
So just
You're
over, wow. So if we hold that 14, which I don't think we're quite holding it for the whole year, but if we hold it, we'll be right around 700,000 pounds of green coffee. So just under 600, around 550 to 600 roasted pounds.
Wow. And you have 2 lourings?
3. We have a 15, a 35, and a 70.
Shoot.
Yeah.
What's the theory on that?
opportunity was the theory. So we had the 15. We bought the 15 when we bought the business, and then the 35 we found just before COVID, just after COVID, just before COVID. We found when we opened our second, or like our first like full on roasting facility, we found the 35. It was in a box in New Jersey, sitting there. It had been sitting there for 2.5 years in the crate, like the original shipping crate, had never been commissioned, had never been turned on, crate never been opened. Brownsville Coffee, I think, is who had that machine. And so he actually found it through like Barista Magazine. And just like I was looking for a 35 kilo roaster. It didn't necessarily have to be a Loring. I was kind of on the fence between Loring and Dietrich at the time, and really had gone back and forth as to what I wanted to do. And then we found this 35 kilo Loring for sale for a heavily discounted price, especially when we paid cash. We found that one, and then it was just kind of off to the races. And then when we moved into this new facility we're in now, just under 3 years ago, we purchased a 70 kilo Loring to kind of, it was a bit of a preemptive purchase. One of my random superpowers being like autism, ADHD, high functioning autistic to like pretty intensely ADHD person is I notice patterns, very, very part of the thing. And so when you start, I physically can feel when things are moving in a more or less statistically relevant direction. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It maybe sounds kind of silly, but that's like how my brain looks at things. Is like consumption rates and patterns and repetitions are like part of the way that it all functions together. So I just kind of like, oh, I think we need another roaster. And they're like, and the Matt, our head roaster's like, you're insane. We don't need another roaster. You're a crazy person. I'm like, no, we for sure need another roaster. And we needed another roaster. So we bought one. And by the time it got in, he was like, I'm really glad you bought that roaster. I'm like, yeah, it's all good. Gotta trust the crazy.
Yeah. How have you been scaling this business? Like, what are you, you got 3 cafes and then it's all online sales. Like I saw you guys are all over Reddit.
Yes. Thank you, Reddit. Thank you so much. We leave you guys alone. We can leave you guys alone. We don't talk to you, but thank you so much.
No, how are you guys scaling this sucker? And, how are you building the systems to kind of deal with that kind of jump? Because that's real, man. That's a lot of volume.
Yeah. Because we're going to celebrate 7 years in September. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how it's gone and how it's worked out. It honestly is a little different than how I'd planned it. If you want to call planning a thing, I don't know. I kind of just do things and hold on for dear life. But I love systems. So that part is like really fun for me. Like I love to build a system and then see where the pinch points are and then try to repair a system or edit or move around things to make it make more sense. That is like, oh my God. It's like when I'm able to create a system that works and flows in the way that I intended for it to flow, and then achieves the goals that we've set forward for it. It's like one of the most gratifying things that we get to do. So like the roastery, the way it's set up is I learned from the Germans how they do their line manufacturing for the grinders, and how straight lines are really, really important, and how tools being in the right place for the person is very important. This also comes from barista competition as well. Mise en place, like a place for everything and everything in its place is this idea. And so the roastery is very linear. So like the coffee moves from the roasters to the destoner, from the destoner to the sorters to the filling lines. And all that happens in like 20 feet or so.
Oh, wow.
It's like it's very quick and very easy to move all that stuff around. And like when it completes through the fulfillment for the packaging line, it then goes to fulfillment. And fulfillment is like 5 feet past the end from the packaging to fulfillment area. And then the van is parked 5 feet past that place. So then it just goes right into the van and out. So it's like we're all just in time as well. So I have an undergrad in business. So a lot of my like business practices are kind of based on that stuff, which I didn't know I was going to use ever because I went to divinity school. But anyways, I ended up using a lot of it. So it turns out like manufacturing makes a lot of sense to me, and like how things should flow and how easy they can flow through a system is really, really, really key. But that I'm there now, right? This is 7 years. I'm there now. The first systems I built were absolute trash. They were so freaking terrible. And the people who were working them were like, this is stupid. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I gotta do better than this.
Are you guys bagging things by hand?
Oh no, we have the 2-way infills. Yeah. 3-way infills.
3?
2-way infills and then a little tiny one. We have like with like two big ones, and then like we the original system we designed was utilizing the Akaya Orions, I mean the little doser things
Yeah.
that we were using those to fill like some of our like overrun or samples. We still use that to do that, but we were originally using those to do like full retail bags and just checking them on a big scale, like a calibrated scale or whatever. So
Wow.
yeah, iterations and like being willing to take feedback on a system that you built is super hard. And like I had to learn that the hard way of like, okay, I can't take this stuff too personal. It's just about achieving the goals. Because if you take it really personal, people really don't want to ever give you feedback again. And then they really you aren't going to build a good system because people are too scared to hurt your feelings or to piss you off and get yelled at or whatever your thing is when it comes to critique. Everyone responds to critique differently, even at different times of their life or their day or whatever. So letting a problem be the problem and not letting the problem be me it has been like a big learning experience. And we started utilizing that technique in a lot of our leadership stuff as well. It's a concept I pulled over from Simon Sinek. He says that he got it from the Air Force, where basically it's called spears. It's a concept where you bring up an idea and then everyone pokes a ton of holes in it. And then you have a better idea because it didn't necessarily have to be your idea that was perfect. If the team can go after the idea as if it is life and death, which the Air Force is, then you can find the best outcome. That doesn't necessarily have to be any one person's work. It can be this kind of team, multiple iteration concept, which is kind of how we try to do everything now, where someone's idea occasionally is perfect. You're like, oh, this is great. Just do it. And then, but often it's like, oh, did you think about this thing or that thing? Oh, no, that's good. Catch that. Thank you for catching that. Let's make this edit here to make this idea better. And that's how we've treated manufacturing. That's how we've treated green coffee buying, marketing. Everything has now spun to that concept, which is difficult to do, but takes a lot of willingness to be wrong and to admit wrong, which is, I hate being wrong. I don't know about you, but man, wow.
Is there a sales team who's generating all this, like this increase in volume, or is it just aware?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sales and marketing. Yeah. We have two sales guys. One kind of functions on the Northeast and the West Coast. And then one focuses here locally in the Triangle, which is what we call our kind of the area we live, the kind of general Southeast and then the Pacific Northwest because he lived there for a while. But yeah, and of course, marketing and just getting coffees out to people and just coming up with some of the craziest ideas you've ever heard of, which is really fun for me. I really like a lot of the things that we do that are a bit avant-garde, and some of them piss people off dramatically, which is
well, like what? What do you got? What are some of those ideas?
I mean, we have a product called The Future, which is focusing on co-fermented coffees blended with other coffees or whatever to make a flavor profile. Like the one we have up right now is called Fruit Punch. We've had Tiki Cocktail. We've had grape soda. We've had strawberry lemonade. We've had all kinds of crazy ones that are just absolutely a little bit nuts. One was called Bananas Foster. That one smelled a lot like weed, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so those things we do a lot of stuff like that tends to frustrate some of the people who have a little bit more hard stance of what they feel like coffee should be or should taste like. I've always kind of been of the inclination, because I came in a little bit later to coffee, that if it tastes good, it is good. And it's like, at least if it tastes good, it tastes good. So enjoy it and have a good time. And if it does good for people, then you should really give it some credit. Now, do I like every co-fermented coffee that's ever been made? No, there are some of them are truly, truly, truly heinous. But I also don't like every washed coffee in the world either. I tasted a beautiful washed coffee or what could have been a beautiful washed coffee today that just tasted like peanut butter. And that's a problem for me. I don't really want that coffee personally, but yeah.
What do you think of Best of Panama and their statement?
It's fun.
That just came out?
Right. Yeah. I think that's tricky, right? Because it's kind of riding between my two worlds, right? So I use a Panamanian, honey processed Panamanian coffee for Worlds in 2017. So of course I'm like mega connected to Panama, and we may sell more Panama Geisha by volume than anyone in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
It'd be probably pretty close. Yeah, we do this black label selection, which is like all these competition level coffees every year. And so we'll buy 5, 6, 8, 9 lots from Panama. That's where the majority of them come from. I mean, it was pretty wild to see 2 coffees that I just purchased get first and third at the WBC. Were not first, second and third at the WBC was pretty wild. Like I just bought Jameson Savage's Terroir, which got third, and whichever one Jack used, we bought as well.
Nirvana.
Yeah, Nirvana. The guy's nuts. Anyway, so we just bought those and but we also buy from Diego Bermudez. We buy from Lojas. We buy from all these other groups that you're also familiar with. And we are also like very on the cutting edge of processing and stuff. So I understand that the Panamanian group wants to protect Their goal, full stop, is to protect what they believe to be the IP of Panama geisha. That's kind of how I'm describing it anyway.
Maybe recap the statement so listeners kind of know if they don't know.
Yes, right. So the statement came out by the Best of Panama, which is like a very professional group. I mean, they run the cleanest, most immaculate cupping competition in the world. Whatever. I've done COE, done Best of Panama. The Best of Panama runs the tightest operation, cleanest, best experience overall in the world. It's incredible. And so they released a statement after they'd had some controversy about some coffees that had been tinkered with. We'll call it tinkered with because I don't want to use inflammatory words that maybe even that they use or other professionals use to kind of blackball certain producers. I'm not trying to use those terms really. It's not necessary, but you can go find it. It's very easy to find. I'm sure they have it tagged on their Instagram or whatever. But they basically wanted to push out anyone who had used any yeasts or any flavorings or anything that they believe to be flavorings or any of those kind of things out of their competition, which is totally their own prerogative. At the Cup of Excellence, you also can't use, you can't inoculate with yeast. I don't think any yeasts. I know you can't use manufactured yeasts like SEMA or any of these other ones that people are using for COE, because we had just judged COE Honduras the week before BOP.
Oh, nice.
So anyway, Matt and I went down for that. But so they released a statement saying that they also kicked one producer who has a very famous last name out of the competition for life, as far as I understand.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. That's the whisper I heard. If I'm wrong, I'm totally down to be wrong. Again, poke holes in all my arguments. I really hope that's not true because that family makes some of the best coffees on the planet. And I don't think the whole family got removed from the situation. I just know of the one. I think there's 7 or 8 with that same last name. We're kind of talking around it a little bit. I'm sorry to do that. I don't want to be like this gossip spreader person. So, and I know that those names were not all released publicly. I want to keep that still on the DL. If you can find it, if you want to find it, you can find it. I can guarantee that. Just text Cole or whatever. Anyway, who's not here?
Don't text Cole. Don't bring him into this.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can edit that part out. Anyways, so they released a statement about that, and they made some pretty pointed, I would say overly zealous, in my personal opinion, comments about certain producers in other countries who are very famous for their processing techniques. I think they should have left that part completely out. That was an unprofessional look, in my opinion. Most people agree, even Colombians agree, that Panama Geisha is some of the best coffee that's ever been and will ever be. And I understand their stance on trying to keep what Panama Geisha producers believe to be special, which is their terroir, their natural yeasts that are in the air, and the variety or submutations of geisha that exist in their terroir. They want to keep that to be very special, and they're trying to protect that. Because they're trying to protect their own financial interests, which is very obvious. They're trying to protect the heritage of the concept, which is still a young heritage, but still a heritage nonetheless. And they want to protect what they believe to be the right profile for coffee going forward, which is their own prerogative. And everyone has an opinion. They're like armpits. Everybody's got two, usually. Sometimes they stink, sometimes they don't. That's how it goes. But I get it. I totally understand the viewpoint. I totally understand the frustration with feeling like something is out of control or may spin out of control, because it's life. It's not necessarily life and death for these producers, but it's a big part of their annual money as to what they're going to make off these auctions. So I get it. I totally understand the fear, and I get it. I don't agree with that. That's totally fine to kick it out of the competition. That's totally fine. But to make the pointed shots about functionally calling producers liars is not a good look. That never looks good. No matter how right you believe to be, state your opinion and let the rest of it be up to the listener. In my opinion, when it comes to stuff like that, it was a tough look for me. I understood the point, but I wish it would have been executed a tiny bit more professionally, because these are some of the most professional people in coffee. These producers are truly a professional group of people and are lovely human beings. I was talking with some of them earlier today. I'm trying to buy coffee from them. So please sell me coffee. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough. Opinions are what they are. I am not of the opinion that these yeasts or this oxidation process or these thermal shock processes or everyone has their own name for their thing. Even the co-fermented stuff. I think is really fun and has a huge value add for specialty coffee. Do these coffees have to be in every competition? Do they have to be in every cupping competition? No, I don't think so. I don't think that necessarily has to be the reality for them. But to discredit them or the producers of them as being doing anything illicit or doing anything untruthful or whatever, I think it's a little heavy-handed, and it sounds pretty. Start looking at it pretty closely. Historically, people who look like me or us have set the realities for what producing coffee should be, look like, feel like, smell like. I think as producers who are often historically brown and black across the global spectrum of coffee, as they start to create a voice for themselves and to say what coffee can, should, and would and could taste like, I think we should really listen. I think we should really listen and not have to like everything that we see and feel, but we should listen and provide them that opportunity to showcase their own creativity in a way that maybe we can't. Some of the stuff that's come out of Colombia in the last, 3 years has probably been some of the most interesting coffee that I've ever tasted in my entire life. Has all of it been great? No, absolutely not. But has a lot of it been super, super freaking interesting? And they're applying the scientific method and repeating experiments and getting better faster than any origin has ever. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to see. 5 years ago, people didn't believe that naturals were possible in Colombia.
Yeah.
And now they're producing container loads of high quality naturals every year, very high quality naturals. So it's like it's a bit mind bending of a time. And yeah, I don't know. It's also pretty nuanced and pretty challenging. And I'll probably say something. I have probably said something now that I want to retract in two years or whatever. Like, oh, that Kyle guy sure was an idiot. But who knows? Whatever. We'll get there, and we have to trust people on the way.
Yeah, I think it's about pushing the boundaries, like you're saying, and it doesn't have to go into every competition, but I think there is a place for it, and it's finding its place. It's going to take time to find its place, and
of course, yeah. I mean, the first natural coffees we tasted back when when y'all were getting into coffee, they were pretty gross.
Yeah,
even like from good producers, you like every fourth cup, you'd be like, "Ooh, that's really bad." And I think that's kind of where kind of co-ferments and these thermal shock coffees, these oxidized coffees are right now. They're kind of figuring it out. And yeah, I can't wait to see what happens in another 5 years. What is coffee going to be like in another 5 years?
Yeah, I think we can apply, like you're saying, the scientific method to not only those coffees, but so many parts along the coffee, value chain. And how can we,
of course,
use that method to like improve and try and push boundaries. And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. And we're a young industry. We rush over to one thing, and we all, used to go to, it was only pour overs, and now, FETCO rules or whatever. And it's okay to experiment. And hopefully we'll find out what happens, what's going to go on here. So what's next for you? What's next for Black and White? You just opened a new store.
Ooh. We did open a new store in the airport in Raleigh, which is cool. It's a very new experience for us. We've never done anything that is so focused on speed of service. It's quite a pared down menu. You can get all of our coffees that we have on the menu as pour overs in any of our cafes. This airport cafe is not that way, right? Like, it's batch brew, and it has an Eversys, and it's just a different concept. And so it's been really interesting to see, to help build systems to make that achievable. But one of our goals has always been to kind of demystify specialty coffee in a way. We found a lot of success creating some of the most wild and beautiful coffees in the world. We also sell quite a lot of our coffees that are based around flavor profiles. And so we created a new profile for the airport. North Carolina is relatively famous in the global sense of concept for aviation. The Wright brothers, though they are from Ohio, they made their first flight in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The blend that we did for the airport is called First in Flight, which is, again, lots of puns and things like that. But it looks like an old timey postcard. I don't have a bag for me to show you, but like the graphic is a little different than what you see behind me. These are like our old black label designations, but this is a little bit more of a full art piece that we had commissioned for the label. So it's a pretty fun project. And yeah, it's been interesting to undergo the whole new food service concept. You learn new things every time you hop into a new idea or a new way of doing business.
Why go with an Eversys?
Oh, so yeah, we've been utilizing Eversys quite a lot in our wholesale business. We mostly sell them to people we call customers. which means they have like, it's a bakery and we have coffee, or it's a tap room and we have coffee, or it's, macaroons, or, whatever it may be. Right. So when we were going into the airport, we knew that we would not have, this is an interesting new concept for us in that it is a license agreement. So basically another firm is operating the employment of the baristas and the staff there. So we knew it was going to be a challenge to keep everyone trained on a traditional espresso machine, especially with the labor market in the US right now being pretty challenging. It's challenging to keep baristas in a cafe setting, much less in an airport setting where they're getting, they're doing 2,000 drinks a day.
Wow.
If it were a traditional machine, that would be very, very, very challenging, just physically, mentally, spiritually, all those things. We want to try to eliminate as many barriers as possible. So we ended up going with the ROSSO Shopmaster Pro, which is like a four head situation and like 2 steam wands and the whole deal. I think the biggest one they make is really rad. And then trying to design a coffee that would go to that machine and end up producing drinks that we wanted, how we wanted them to taste. And it was challenging. It was a new challenge to like think about coffee and solubility. These super automatic espresso machines can't quite extract coffee the same way like an E80 or an EK43 or any of these new high-end grinders can extract coffee. And there's something special about the 58 millimeter group head. For some reason, it extracts coffee so thoroughly. It's wild. I don't exactly understand why it works so well, but it sure does. Those guys just happened to fall into it really luckily in the early 1900s or no, the 60s. The E61 was kind of the advent of the 58, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Anyways, we're getting off on a rabbit hole there. Anyways, so we started working with Eversys to try to achieve our goals for the airport, and it had worked really, really, really well to achieve good extraction, fast ticket times, consistent extraction, and be in a place where we can dial the machine in, once or twice a day with the ETC calibration stuff to where it can be operating at a pretty consistent and very high volume at the same time, which is, man, consistency is probably the hardest thing in coffee. When you go to cafes. It's like even the best cafes in the world can serve you a terrible espresso. And I'm sure people who, hopefully not anyone who's listening to this, but definitely there are people who've gone into our cafes and gotten terrible espresso as well. So I'm sorry.
What we're kind of going side topic here, but what do you think of the fully automatic machine going into latte art?
I think it's interesting. I mean, the latte art competition has never been about pulling great espresso. That is also a competition that is lost on me. I wish I understood it better. I wish I had more of a passion for it. I honestly just do not. And I served on the board for all those competitions for a year, and I really loved it. It's just like trying to get hyped up about that stuff is just not my thing. Man, that sounds really egotistical to me, but I wish that style of latte art never really made a place in the U.S. And so no one in the U.S. really does that stuff super well. I did see some this year that were pretty impressive. Some more people have gotten interested in it in the U.S. And it's trying to find a little bit of traction, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't follow it really, but there was lots of controversy when it first came out, and I don't know if that's good or bad or. Yeah,
I think a controversy is good in its own way, right? Where people start talking, and sometimes you'll be pissed about things, you'll be hot button about something, and then you will realize that that really wasn't that big of a deal. It was just I hadn't thought about it enough. I got pissed about something random, and I didn't actually think about it.
Okay, buddy, that's it. We're up against 1:08 here. We're up against time.
Yeah.
I'll let you go. Cole sends his regards.
No, it's always fun. Yeah.
Hey, look at that. You've made it. Thanks for listening to By the Drip. If you could please subscribe, rate, and give us a comment, that'd mean the world to me. Till next time.